Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Booklist Book and Author Extravaganza. I'm Donna Seaman, Adult Books Editor at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we will pass along other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Also, Booklist will now be offering closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned above. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. And last but not least, links to today's slides and a title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom an hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. Now we have a very special group of presenters here today. It is an extravaganza. We have Annie Mazes, Senior Manager, Adult Library Marketing at Workman Publishing. Dylan Thuras, author of Gastro Obscura. Lainey Mays, Library Marketing Coordinator, HarperCollins Publishers. Wanda M. Morris, author of All Her Little Secrets. Nicole Jarvis, Marketing Director, Adult Trade at Bloomsbury. Emily Ludlaw, Library Marketing Associate, Sourcebooks. Mary Kay Eder, author of The Girls Who Stepped Out of Line. Loretta Breuning, author of Status Games. And Allan Lichtman, author of 13 Cracks. We will begin with book and author presentations, and then we will have a Q&A session with these esteemed writers. First, we will hear from Dylan Thuras and Annie Mazes. Annie handles adult library marketing for all imprints at Workman Publishing Company. She also heads up the Adult Library Marketing Association Committee. Some favorite titles include The Orphan Master's Son and Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast. After 10 years, Annie still can't believe she gets to book talk with librarians every day. #dream job. Dylan is co-author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Atlas Obscura, an explorer's guide to the world's hidden wonders, and the best-selling The Atlas Obscura Explorer's Guide for the World's Most Adventurous Kids. He is also the co-founder and creative director of atlasobscura.com. Dylan has appeared on CBS Sunday Morning, NPR's All Considered and Science Friday. He's been featured in the New Yorker and the New York Times and Men's Health. He is a frequent speaker on the topic of the changing nature of exploration at such conferences as SSSW and Applied Brilliance. His previous projects include Curious Expeditions about traveling in Europe, Eastern Europe for a year, and The World of Wonders, a series of videos and articles for Slate. You can find Dylan online at Dylan Thuras. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us. Hello. Annie, are you going to say anything first, or should I just jump into it?
You are welcome to just jump in.
Okay, cool. Then I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let me do screen. Okay. And share. And then I'm going to move this up here so all of you guys can see this. Can you see this?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to sort of go through a quick overview of kind of really quickly the history of Atlas, and then Gastro Obscura and what we're doing and what we hope to do with it. So it was a decade ago when Josh and I, pictured here, showed up at Workman's door, and it wasn't clear that what we were doing was making any sense, or certainly that it would necessarily make any sense as a book. And what we were doing was essentially an art project, creating this map of hidden wonders all around the world, and building this community of people who wanted to explore the world in this way, to sort of travel differently and discover wonders near and far. Now, this is what the site looked like back in 2009, at the very, very start of things. And we shared things like the gates of hell in Turkmenistan, this 300-foot burning hole in the Turkmenistan desert. It's actually an industrial accident that happened in the early 70s and has been on fire for 50 years. Or this rope bridge in Peru, sometimes called the Quechua-Chaca, but it's also called the Last Incan Bridge, because it is woven from grass, remade every year, and done in the exact same way as it would have been 500 years ago during the height of the Incan Empire. It's essentially a functioning piece of Incan infrastructure. So this is the kind of places that we shared. In 2016, after 5 years of writing and refining, we managed to kind of put that all together into the book, into Atlas Obscura. I think we sort of stumbled upon a surprise. We didn't know what to expect. It went well. And I think it's sort of because it was a book that people bought for people they weren't sure what to get. And they said, maybe they'll like this. We followed up in 2018 with the kids book. You'll never speak to a more terrifying crowd of people than a group of 7th graders. So that was a good experience for me. And we went on, we have a series of wall calendars and page-a-day calendars. We also did a revised edition of the book, and the book's been translated into over, I think, 20 languages now, and we've sold over 1 million sort of things across the lines. And so, over the last few years, we've grown a lot in terms of what we do in publishing, what we do in online audience, the kinds of things we do. We run trips now. But I think the most ambitious, most exciting project we've undertaken in the last 10 years is this. It's Gastro Obscura. So a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, we came to Workman and said, basically, we want to try this again. And we have another way we want to take people around the world. We want to show them not the world's hidden wonders, but the world's edible wonders. We want to take people on an exploration of the world's most interesting ingredients, recipes, restaurants, farms. So we want to sort of take the lens of food and apply it to the world with the same in the same way we did with Atlas Obscura. And I teamed up with Cecily Wong, who's an incredible fiction writer as well. And she joined the Atlas team. And together we started working on the Gastro Obscura book. And we started in a couple of ways. We were working on the book at the same time. Because we originated in 2009 as a website, we did the same thing with Gastro Obscura. So we've been building the online component of this for the last 4 years. So it's a database of unique foods and unique places as well. And we also publish a lot of original stories under the Gastro Obscura title. So this is about the art and science of Kashmir's pink tea. It's actually pink because the chlorophyll reacts with bicarbonate of soda and transforms it into this incredible pink color. It doesn't taste pink particularly, it's kind of salty. We also did a story about an exiled Italian prince who runs a pasta food truck. These are the kinds of things that we cover in Gastro Obscura. And after doing this for 3 years, and Cecily and I working on the book and kind of this ecosystem forming, we were able to pull all of this together to take all of the most interesting things, all of the most interesting food stories around the world, and put it into Gastro Obscura, which is finally here. It looked like it was going to be here at the end of 2020, but for obvious reasons, we waited, and it is really here now. So, we think of Gastro Obscura, we think it's to food what Atlas was to travel, which is to say Atlas Obscura wasn't really a travel book. And in some ways, Gastro Obscura is more than a food book. We think that it's a book that reaches out to anyone who's interested in eating, in the world, in delightful and unusual stories. And it's a book with a mission of basically getting people out exploring and discovering new things all around them. We hope that it is a bit of a category breaker, that people who wouldn't necessarily buy a food book will look at this and say, there's something in here I wanna know about. And so the book takes you, these are some of the interior spreads. It takes you around the world, continent by continent, country by country. Every entry includes a how to try it box. So you can, there's a way to experience these interesting ingredients or dishes for yourself, whether it's like this one at the Siberian sashimi cutting competition, or it's the operating hours of the cafeteria in Chernobyl. Alongside those entries are sidebars that cover history and bring to life fascinating details of familiar pantry staples like milk or mustard. But when you really dig into milk and mustard, let me tell you, it's a lot more interesting than you might expect. We also have the overlooked stories of food pioneers, people who don't necessarily get their due as important culinary figures, folks like Georgia Gilmore, who fed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the other freedom fighters at her dinner table, and was an incredibly pivotal part of that movement. And we also, we also have incredible dishes like this amazing pie bird here, which is like a little decoration that you put in pies. And the whole book is in full color and illustrations throughout. It's really a big feast for the eyes. Sometimes people ask us, what is Atlas Obscura? What is Gastro Obscura? For me, Gastro Obscura is this Belgian library that contains 107 sourdough starters, each in their own jar. And they're all kept alive and fed to preserve the biodiversity of bread. It's basically a sourdough zoo. Gastro Obscura is climbing to this remote peak in China called Mount Hua for a cup of tea at the Huishan Tea House, which is over 2,000 meters in the sky. Gastro Obscura is the 24-hour vending machine that is restocked daily with homemade, full-size pecan pies. Gastro Obscura is feeding thousands of monkeys a towering buffet of tropical fruit among the ruins of a 13th century Thai temple. Gastro Obscura is a hometown thing for me. I went to this growing up in Minnesota. It's a very familiar site. Although from the outside, it's not, I think people are not that familiar with this. It's watching a beauty queen in a glass-walled showroom having her likeness carved in a 90-pound block of grade A butter, the Minnesota State Fair. And Gastro Obscura is eating a scoop of Zanzibar spice ice cream while enjoying the view from The Rock, this restaurant in Tanzania. These are a small sampling of what Gastro Obscura is. We consider it a passport to the world, to new flavors, to new stories. It's a book for anyone who wants to eat, who dreams of eating, and who longs to explore. And I really hope that you will all enjoy it. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Dylan. This book is amazing.
Thank you. Here, I'll stop.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited for this book. It's stunning. It's fascinating. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Mazes. I'm going to quickly go through a few additional books to know about coming out in the fall. Next slide, please. The Archer is a beautiful debut novel by Shruti Swami, who had a short story collection last summer called A House is a Body. This is set in Bombay during the 60s and 70s, and it is a beautiful rich cultural experience and a vivid exploration of very relatable themes like art, gender, motherhood, as you follow Vidya and her love affair for the form of dance called Kathak. Next up is How Magicians Think by professional magician Joshua J. He reveals the artistry, the inside history, the fascinating traditions of this long-shrouded subject. It is not a how-to book or a how do they do it expose. It's really about the psychology behind the tricks and the illusions. And he answers questions like, can a magic trick be too good? And how do you saw people in half? Next up, we have Lonely Castle in the Mirror. It's in a tranquil neighborhood of Tokyo. 7 students are avoiding going to school, hiding in their darkened bedrooms, unable to face their family and friends until the moments the mirrors in their room start shining. At a single touch, they are pulled from their lonely lives into this wondrous castle straight out of a Grimm's fairy tale. This is a poignant bestseller in Japan tale about the importance of human connection. It's Chronicles of Narnia meets The Breakfast Club with a signature Japanese flair. It's a sympathetic, insightful look at the causes of teen angst and depression in modern day Japan. Next up, we have Unearthing the Secret Garden by New York Times bestselling author Marta McDowell, who has revealed why plants have stirred some of our most cherished authors like Beatrix Potter, Emily Dickinson, and Laura Ingalls Wilder. And now she tackles Frances Hodgson Burnett, the author of The Secret Garden. In this book, she delves into Burnett's professional and gardening life, complementing her fascinating account with charming period photographs and illustrations. Next up, we have a memoir that I think is incredibly powerful. The author, Ann West Moss, found herself bleeding uncontrollably while she was in the middle of a writing class, and she took herself to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with hemangioma, and she had a hysterectomy. And so this book, this memoir, which has this beautiful voice, delves into her infertility, her grief, her healing, what it means to leave a legacy for readers of Lena Dunham or When Breath Becomes Air, The Bright Hour. Next up is Grains for Every Season. Joshua McFadden's first book was the James Beard winning cookbook 6 Seasons. What he did for vegetables in that book, he's doing for grains in this book. It is rich with recipes. There are gluten-free recipes, over 150 stunning color photographs throughout. This book is going to be amazingly helpful. And you can't have grains without having dessert. Cheryl Day is a rock star. She is the queen of Southern baking. She says, my great-great-grandmother was both enslaved and a pastry cook who was famous for her biscuits and cakes, and there's power in that. And from this position of strength, she is delving into her most treasured baking, Southern baking, and showing why Southern baking might be the future of baking. Also 150 gorgeous colored photographs throughout. And my last book is How to Be a Girl. Mama, something went wrong in your tummy and it made me come out as a boy instead of a girl. When Marlo Mack's 3-year-old utters these words, her entire world splits open. Friends, families, experts, and Marlo herself have long downplayed her son's request for pretty dresses and long hair as experimentation, but that time is over. When little M begs, weeping to be reborn, Marlo knows she needs to listen to her child. How to Be a Girl is Mack's unflinching memoir of M's coming out. Fearful of the prejudice that menaces her future, Mac finds her liberal views surprisingly challenged. Why can't M just be a boy who wears skirts and loves fairies? But M does not give up. She is a girl. As mother and daughter teach one another how to be a girl, Mac realizes it's really the world that has a lot to learn. This is for parents of LGBTQ children. It is an incredibly inspiring personal narrative of a mother's struggle to support her transgender daughter. And that is it for me. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy your long weekend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annie. And thank you, Dylan. All very exciting. And now we have Wanda M. Morris and Lainey Mays. Yay. Lainey is the marketing coordinator of the library marketing team at HarperCollins. Originally from Mississippi, her hobbies include listening to any podcast she can find, since she produces the Library Love Fest podcast, which brings librarians and great books together through author interviews, conversations with editors, and upcoming book presentations. Welcome, Wanda. Wanda is an alumna of the Yale Writers Workshop and Robert McKee's Stories Seminar. Wanda is a member of Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America. As a corporate attorney, Wanda has worked in the legal departments of several Fortune 100 companies. She has previously served as president of the Georgia chapter of the Association of Corporate Counsel. She is a founder of its Women's Initiative, an empowerment program for female in-house lawyers. Wanda lives in Atlanta, Georgia. All Her Little Secrets is her debut novel and has been selected as HarperCollins Fall 2021 lead read title. Welcome to you both and congratulations, Wanda.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Wanda M. Morris, and as was just read out, All Her Little Secrets is my debut novel. It's the story of Elise Littlejohn, who seemingly has it all: a well-paying job as a corporate lawyer, a great group of friends, but all that comes to a screeching halt one January morning when she goes to the office for a meeting with her boss, and there she finds him dead. And what does she do next? She does the unthinkable. She walks away without calling the authorities. And the reason she walks away is because she has a cachet of dark secrets, including a small town past and a brother who spent some time on the other side of the law. Soon after, she's promoted to replace her boss. And once she's in the executive suite, she learns some critical information that places her in the middle of an ethical and moral dilemma. Suddenly, her past and her professional and her private lives come crashing together. And now she must race to protect the brother she tried to save years ago and stop a conspiracy far more dangerous than she ever realized. The story is told in dual timelines. The summer of 1979 in Chillicothe, a small rural town in East Georgia, and present-day Atlanta. The reason for the dual timelines is to get a better understanding of who Elise really is and who were the women in her life and what did they mean to her? How did they shape who she became? The dual timelines also help layer the mystery. What really happened back in that summer of 1979 and what happened in that executive suite? Both mysteries are inextricably tied to Elise and her brother Sam, and both mysteries come to an explosive end. So why did I write this book? Well, I guess I've always been a fan of thriller novels by authors like John Grisham and Joseph Bender, but I couldn't find books like theirs on the shelves, books that featured strong, smart, sophisticated Black female protagonists who were riding around in, speeding cars and chasing down bad guys in dark office towers. So I took the advice of Toni Morrison when she said, if there's a book that you wish to read, but it hasn't been written, then you should be the one to write it. Now, when I set out to write this book, I knew that there were two things that I wanted to accomplish. First, I wanted to write a twisty mystery with women caught in the snare of it. And second, I wanted to write about those issues that women, particularly women of color, experience in real life. Things like the toxicity of office politics, gaslighting, being the only one, and even racial profiling. Many women, and particularly women of color, go to some extraordinary lengths to make sure that they have a seat at the table and that they are relevant. Now, almost every woman in this book is on a journey, and she's handling it the best way she can, whether it's a bad marriage, office politics, or just systems in place that work against her. Imagine you're a woman and you have to get up every day and work with a group of people who despise you simply because of your gender or your race. But still, you have to do your job impeccably without making a mistake. Or imagine you're a 14-year-old girl. You live in bleak poverty, but still you have this one shot, just one shot to get out of the poverty. But systems of oppression threaten to take that shot away. What would you do? You can find out when you read All Her Little Secrets. It's coming November 2nd. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for having me.
My goodness. Thank you so much, Wanda. That was amazing. This is Lainey. So good to see everyone or see you, your names. I just want to remind everyone that this is available as an e-galley. So you guys, I'm sure after that talk, you're all looking for it right now. So you can go download it and get reading. Thank you again, Wanda. And let's go on to some books. So the next slide is my intro. Hello, Lainey. Next is, I just want to quickly let you know that anything you need, librarylovefest.com, all the socials are there. Go check this out and you can get in contact. So the first book is Over My Dead Body by Jeffrey Archer. So this is one of the best-selling novelists in the world, and he's coming back to HarperCollins for the global release of his new character-driven crime thriller, an unputdownable story of murder, revenge, and betrayal. Jeffrey has topped the bestseller list from around the world with sales of over 275 million copies. And his new book, Over My Dead Body, we see Chief Inspector William Warwick. He's assigned to a cold case where he chases a criminal who is confident he has gotten away with murder. And this novel takes us from London to Geneva and even to a locked room murder aboard a luxury transatlantic cruise liner. So while this is the 4th volume of a popular UK series, it also is a great entry point into this series because it establishes everything you need to know about the Detective Chief Inspector. So we'll be launching Warwick in the US to a really big US audience, and we're very excited. Next is Death at Greenway by Laurie Raider Day. So a mystery with a World War II twist about 2 nurses sent to Agatha Christie's holiday estate to care for evacuated children. When a body is discovered nearby, this idyllic setting becomes background to a deadly mystery filled with details about the Christie estate, and inspired by the true story of Christie's offer to use the estate as a sanctuary for children during the war. This is a nifty new direction for Laurie, and she's been building a solid reputation and sales for her psychological suspense. So she's won so many mystery awards, and we're very excited to see her do something new. So this next book is We Know You Remember by Tovah Alsterdahl. This is one of Sweden's hottest crime writers. She's making her US debut in this dark atmospheric police procedural based on a real crime that shocked 1980s Sweden. So it's the first in a trilogy. A man returns home after 20 years to find his father dead. The subsequent investigation resurrects the community's memory of a rape and a murder of a local girl a while back. And because the son of this dead man that's returning is the boy who was convicted of that crime, the investigator, that's a female cop who grew up with him, a lot is coming to the surface. This is the winner of the best Swedish crime novel of the year. It's a suspenseful and beautifully written novel just about the nature of guilt and memory. So this one is super exciting, and be on the lookout for that one. Next is Schuette by Claire Oshetsky. So this is about a mother who gives birth to an owl baby. Stay with me on this. This is a magical realism at its best. And this is an interesting, clever book that is really about the challenges of motherhood and raising an autistic child. It's startling, potent, terrifying, and wholly original. And it's about a mother who totally loves and accepts her owl baby. And it's a unique way of looking at motherhood and accepting the children the way they are. It's brilliant. And please read the letter from the author on Edelweiss and see that amazing Romanilon quote on the slide. Next is The Matter of Black Life. So this is a stunning anthology of writing on Black life in America, collected from the pages of The New Yorker. It's edited and with a foreword by Jelani Cobb. It reaches back across a century with Rebecca West's classic account of 1947 lynching trial and James Baldwin's Letter from a Region in My Mind. And yet it also explores our current moment, from the classroom to the prison cells, bringing together reporting, profiles, memoir, and criticism from writers such as Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, Zadie Smith, and so many more. And next is When Ghosts Come Home by Wiley Cash. So Wiley Cash returns with a tense thriller about a drug-related murder and racial tensions on a coastal island off Wilmington, North Carolina. Author Teresa Ann Fowler raves a treatise on race in America, wrapped in a family drama, wrapped in a mystery. It brings us thoughtful examination of a good man's struggle to do right under trying circumstances. Cash puts his whole heart on the page of these flawed true characters, and the reward is ours. For a fan of Greg Iles' issue-based atmospheric Southern crime novels. And be sure to join us on June 8th on Door to Door, our Facebook Live program every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, because Wiley's going to join us. We're very excited. Next is The Surrogate by Toni Helene. This is a debut domestic suspense. In northern Minnesota, a husband and wife are trying to have a baby. They make a contract with a 19-year-old girl who wants to go to college, and they're going to ask her to carry their child. The unexpected consequences of the decision make for a page-turning novel that explores intriguing themes, including motherhood and surrogacy. And the author is an attorney who has worked in the area of family law, studying these complex issues surrounding surrogacy. And so the book setting, the North Country of Minnesota, is incredibly evocative, especially in the dead of winter, creating incredible ambiance and tension. And then last, Do I Know You by Sarah Strowmeyer. So this is from award-winning YA and adult fiction writer, Sarah Strowmeyer. She won the Agatha Award. She's an Agatha Award-winning author of 18 books for adults and young adults. Her new book is a satiric, over-the-top psychological thriller about 2 women, the tragedy that connected them as teenagers, and the terrible reckoning that will decide their fates as adults. It's a page-turner that combines wisecracking narration with skillfully told plot that lawyers and themes of trauma and memory, opioid addiction, how the rich seemingly live outside the law, and the enduring strength of sibling bonds. So that is it for me, and thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wanda and Lainey. And now, Nicole Jarvis. Nicole is the Marketing Director for Adult Trade at Bloomsbury Publishing. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Jarvis, the marketing director at Bloomsbury. I'm excited to talk to you all today about some great books we have coming out this year. We unfortunately couldn't have an author to make the scheduling time, so you just get to hear from me, but we have so many awesome books. You're going to love it. I've created an ARC request form for everything I'm talking about today. The link is in the slide here, and Grace will also include it in her follow-up email, and you're welcome to email me. My email is on all of the different slides. And I've noted which books are on NetGalley and Edelweiss as well. Okay, next slide. I am so thrilled to tell you about The Second by our star best-selling beloved author, Carol Anderson, who is a professor at Emory University. Her first book, White Rage, had incredible success, and this will be even bigger. It is the perfect match of subject and author and feels incredibly urgently relevant. The Second refers to the Second Amendment. As Carol points out, regardless of which legal interpretation of the amendment is invoked, whether the individual's right to bear arms or the collective right to a well-regulated militia, each has been used against Black Americans since it was codified. Unlike the other amendments in the Bill of Rights, the inherent flaw in the Second Amendment is that its primary function from the beginning was to curtail Black Americans' rights. The Second is neither a pro-gun or anti-gun book. The lens is the citizenship rights and the human rights of African Americans. In this book, Carol makes the case, as clearly and inarguably as she did in White Rage, that the problem in the end is that the Second Amendment is ultimately not about guns, but about anti-Blackness. And this book comes out next week, and we hope everyone will read it and talk about it. Next slide. Tom Standage's fleet-footed and surprising global histories have delighted readers and cemented his reputation as one of our leading interpreters of technologies past and present. Now he returns with an account of personal transportation and how it's shaped societies and cultures over millennia. Standage zips through the eras of horsepower, trains, and bicycles, revealing how each successive mode of transit embedded itself into the world we live in, from the geography of our cities to our experience of time to our notions of gender. Then, delving into the history of the automobile's development, Standage explores the social resistance to cars and the upheaval that their widespread adoption required. Today, the social transformations spurred by COVID and climate change will create a unique opportunity for all of us to critically re-examine our relationship with the car. With a brief history of motion, Standage invites us to look at our past with fresh eyes so we can create a future we want to see. Next. Many of you might remember Sam Quinones's incredible Dreamland, which first published in 2015. After his first book, Quinones was among the first to see the dangers that lay ahead: synthetic drugs and a new generation of kingpins. In fentanyl, traffickers landed a painkiller 100 times more powerful than morphine. They laced it into cocaine, meth, and counterfeit pills to cause tens of thousands of deaths, at the same time as Mexican traffickers made methamphetamine cheaper and more potent than ever. Amid the landscape of despair, writer Quinones found hope in those embracing the forgotten and ignored, illuminating the striking truth that we are only as strong as our most vulnerable. Weaving a stirring analysis of the drug trade into stories of humble communities, The Least of Us delivers an unexpected and awe-inspiring response to the call that shocked the nation in his award-winning Dreamland. We know this book is going to be important to communities across America affected by the opioid epidemic and more. Next slide. In the early 1980s, farmers were suffering through the worst economic crisis to hit rural America since the Great Depression. Instead of receiving assistance from the government like they had in the 1930s, though, these hardworking family farmers were threatened with foreclosure by the very agency that FDR had created to help them. Desperate, they called Sarah Vogel in North Dakota. Sarah, our author, was a young lawyer and single mother, and she listened to farmers who were on the verge of losing everything and naively built a solo practice of clients who couldn't afford to pay her. She began drowning in debt, and soon her own home was facing foreclosure. In a David and Goliath legal battle, Sarah brought a national class action lawsuit, which pitted her against the Reagan administration's Department of Justice in her fight for family farmers' constitutional rights. It was her very first case in front of a judge. A courageous American story about justice and holding the powerful to account, The Farmer's Lawyer shows how the farm economy we all depend on for our daily bread almost fell apart due to the willful neglect of those charged to protect it. Next slide. Daniel Sokach is the head of the New Israel Fund, an organization dedicated to equality and democracy for all Israelis, not just Jews. Can We Talk About Israel is the must-have book for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, grappling with the centuries-long struggle between the two peoples. It's an attempt to explain why Israel inspires such extreme feelings, why it seems like Israel is the answer to what's wrong with the world for half the people in it and what's right with the world for the other half. Complete with engaging illustrations by Christopher Noxon, Can We Talk About Israel is more relevant than ever and is an easy to read yet penetrating look at the history and basic contours of one of the most complicated conflicts in the world. Next slide. From the authors of This Is Happiness and Her Name is Rose, this is a memoir of rural life in rural Ireland and a meditation on power, beauty, and the importance of the natural world. 35 years ago, when they were in their 20s, authors Niall and Christine made the impulsive decision to leave their lives in New York City and move to Christine's ancestral home in the town of Kiltemper in rural Ireland. In 2019, with Christine in the final stages of recovery from cancer and the land itself threatened by the arrival of turbines just one farm over, Niall and Christine decided to document a year of living on their garden, and in their small corner of a rapidly changing world. Going month by month through the year with beautiful seasonal illustrations, this is the story of a garden in all its many splendors and a couple who made it their life observing its wonders. Incal Temple will publish in August alongside the paperback of Niall's lauded novel, This Is Happiness, which is also set in Ireland. Next slide. Next, we have a short story collection from Hilma Wolitzer. Wolitzer, now 91 years old, has gained a reputation as a writer who raises ordinary people and everyday occurrences to new heights. In Today, a Woman Went Mad in the Supermarket, we have a collection of short stories, most of them originally published in magazines in the 60s and 70s, though they all feel relevant to today, along with a new story that brings her early characters into the present. In the title story, a bystander tries to soothe a woman who seems to have cracked under the pressures of motherhood. And in several linked stories throughout, the relationship between the narrator and her husband unfold in a series of delightful vignettes. Zeroing in on the domestic sphere with her usual wit and grace, this collection reintroduces a beloved writer to be embraced by a whole new generation of readers. This book will be perfect for readers of Elizabeth Strout, Lucia Berlin, and Hilma's daughter, Meg Wolitzer. Next slide. On the glittering shores of the Mediterranean in 1928, a dying author in exile races to complete his final novel. Lady Chatterley's Lover is a sexually bold love story, a searing indictment of class distinctions, and a study in sensuality. But the author, D.H. Lawrence, knows it will be censored. He publishes it privately, loses his copies to custom, and dies bereft. In this book, Booker Prize long-listed author Alison MacLeod brilliantly recreates the novel's origins and boldly imagines its journey to freedom through the story of Jackie Kennedy, who historically was known to be an admirer of the novel. Through the stories of Lawrence's writing of Lady Chatterley's Lover, the historic obscenity trial that sought to suppress it in the United Kingdom, and the men and women who fought for its worldwide publication, Alison MacLeod captures the epic sweep of the 20th century from war and censorship to sensuality and freedom. Next slide. After the success of Women Talking in 2019, we were all here at Bloomsbury on the edge of our seats to see what Miriam Toews would write next, and our expectations were exceeded with Fight Night. This stunning new novel about 3 generations of women is classic Toews, alternating between the exuberant, precocious voice of young Swiv and her irrepressible grandma. Fight Night is impossible to put down. Grandma has been fighting all of her life. After her upbringing in a strict religious community, she's fought for those who wanted to take away her independence. She's fought to make peace with the loved ones who left her. And now, as her health fails, she's fighting for her family, for her daughter, partnerless and in her 3rd term of pregnancy, and for her granddaughter, Swiv, a spirited 9-year-old who has been suspended from school. Crammed together in their Toronto home, Grandma and Swiv undertake a vital new project, setting out to explain their lives in letters they will never send. Fight Night is a love letter to mothers and grandmothers and to all the women who are still fighting for a way to live on their own terms. If you haven't read Miriam Toews before, this is the chance. She is a fantastic writer. Next slide. I also just wanted to run you guys through some of our exciting paperbacks that are coming out. The first 3 are fiction and the last one is nonfiction. The Vanishing Sky is about a German family in World War II and is based on the author's own father. Apartment is a story of obsession following an MFA student in New York City who allows one of his charming classmates to move into his rent-controlled apartment. Nothing Can Hurt You is a literary mystery novel that tells the story of a murder through the lives of all who were touched by it. And last but not least, The Price We Pay is a doctor's account of the horrible state of healthcare costs in America and how we can fix them. Final slide. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, and thank you as always for supporting Bloomsbury's books. Again, there's a link to the request form for ARCs, but don't worry if you can't jot it down, it'll be emailed to you. Also, the books are mostly available for download online. And of course, you are free to email me at nicole.jarvis@bloomsbury.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. That was wonderful. Next, we will hear from Mary Kay Eder and Emily Ludlow. Emily is the Library Marketing Associate at Sourcebooks. Previously, she worked with some of the top names in the music industry in Nashville, Tennessee, but ultimately could not resist the pull of her first love, books. Yes. Mary is a retired U.S. Army Major General, a renowned speaker and author, and a thought leader on strategic communication and leadership. General Eder is the former commanding general of the U.S. Army Reserve Joint and Special Troops Support Command, the former deputy chief of the Army Reserve and formerly deputy chief of public affairs for the U.S. Army. General Eder is the author of Leading the Narrative, The Case for Strategic Communication, published by the Naval Institute Press. And the book we'll be talking about today, The Girls Who Stepped Out of Line, Untold Stories of the women who changed the course of World War II. Welcome, we're so honored to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about where this book came from. It was in 2017 when I read an obituary in the Wall Street Journal of a woman named Hilda Eisen, who was a Holocaust survivor, a resistance fighter, and an entrepreneur who with her husband built one of the largest egg producing businesses west of the Mississippi. When I read her story about what she did in World War II, I had to save it. I wanted to know more about her, and someday I thought I would find a use for being able to tell that story. And fast forward to 2019, I had been asked to speak at an Army conference about leadership in women in the early war years. And I had just finished reading 2 more obituaries. I know it sounds like now I read obituaries a lot, which I did for a while, but the 2 I found then were about Virginia Hall, who was a well-known spy from World War II. And the other was actually about a different woman. And this was Stephanie Rader, who was another type of a spy. So I took those 2 stories and talked about them at this conference and then put them away. But in October of 2019, at the Emmy Awards, I was watching as Alex Borstein stood up to accept the Emmy for Best Supporting Actress. And she said, in World War II, my grandmother was in a line to be shot into a pit. She turned to the guard and said, so what happens if I step out of line? And he said, well, I won't shoot you, but somebody probably will. So she stepped out of line. And for that, I am here today. And for that, my children are here today. So step out of line, ladies, step out of line. So that was how I began to put together these stories of incredible people who, despite the trials they faced, the risks, the disbelief of those who they had to work with, managed to make a huge difference in their world and in our lives for all that they have left to us. I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about one of them. If we can look at the next slide. This is Betty McIntosh. Now, Betty grew up in Hawaii and she wanted to be a reporter. Her dad had been a sports writer. So she was a reporter for the Honolulu Advertiser. And she was on the ground at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked. She wrote about that day, but her writing apparently was a little too realistic for the newspapers of the time, and they didn't publish it. It wasn't published until 2012. But she continued to write. She ended up in Washington, and she interviewed a man who had known her father. And he said, wouldn't you like to do something a little different? And she said, yes, but I want to go overseas. She ended up in the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, and she was placed into the division called Morale Operations. And frankly, that was because she wasn't good at the spy stuff. They told her that basically her face was an open sandwich and she could never fool anybody with a lie about who she was or what she was doing. But she was perfect for working in disinformation and misinformation. This picture in the middle is her with two of her comrades working in China, where they were conducting misinformation operations against Japanese troops. You can see some of these are pamphlets that they did, but they also undertook a lot of other very clandestine operations. And in the bottom right, there she is at CIA headquarters for her 100th birthday in 2015. She lived an amazing life and had a tremendous impact and influence with what she did, as did so many of the women in this book. The research for this was fascinating. It went far beyond obituaries and into a great deal of other documents I could find going back to that time. She, like many others, wrote her own autobiography after the war and several other books too, including children's stories and a book about all the other spies she knew. Betty was married 3 times. She married her boss from when she was in China, and she worked that out quite well because you can see in this picture, that is his dog who she stole, or she said it came to her, and that helped her with the introduction. So I hope that you will enjoy these stories as much as I have and really see the connections within them. In many ways, many of these women were connected to or knew of each other. And all of that had a huge impact with everything that they did. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Mary, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you for Booklist for having us all today. I'm Emily Ludloff from Sourcebooks. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to tell you about some of my favorite upcoming Sourcebooks titles. Thank you for your support of Sourcebooks, and please remember to vote for library reads if that is something you do. We do have a deadline coming up next week on June 1st for July titles. Our galleys are available as downloads on NetGalley and Edelweiss. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions about any of our titles, any virtual author appearances, book club guides, or newsletters. We always love to hear from you. And now on to our titles. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with nonfiction. So The Auschwitz Photographer is the true story of Wilhelm Brassy, who was tasked with taking pictures of the people within Auschwitz. This gripping work of World War II narrative nonfiction takes readers behind the barbed wire fences of the world's most feared concentration camp, bringing his story to life as he clicks the shutter button thousands of times before ultimately joining the resistance, defying the Nazis, and then defiantly setting down his camera for good. A lot of the pictures you see in textbooks of Auschwitz were taken by this man, and they've never been compiled like this before. Next slide, please. And we're doing fiction titles because I love my fiction titles. I love this book. This is All the Little Hopes from Leah Weiss, who is the acclaimed author of If the Creek Don't Rise. It is a Southern story of friendship and mystery when the timeless troubles of growing up meet the murky shadows of World War II. So this book is about a 13-year-old Lucy and her friend Allie, and they are itching to solve mysteries in their little Southern town like their hero that they read about, Nancy Drew. Aren't we all? Their chance comes when a man goes missing, a woman stops speaking mysteriously, and their quiet town becomes home to a Nazi prisoner of war camp. The girls embark on a journey of what's right, what's wrong, and what we know to be true. Next slide, please. The Last Mona Lisa is a gripping novel exploring Mona Lisa's very real theft in 1911 and the present underbelly of the art world. More than one historian has wondered if the painting now in the Louvre is a fake. The suspenseful tale taps into our universal fascination with Da Vinci's Enigma, why people are driven to possess certain works of art, and our fascination with the authentic and the fake. Next slide, please. A searing physiological thriller of trauma, dark academia, complicity and revenge, Dark Things I Endure unravels the realities behind campfire legends. While in the grasp of manipulative men, women may momentarily fall, but in the hands of fierce women, men will be brought to their knees to atone for past wrongs. Next slide, please. This one I am most excited for. 3 Black women are linked in unexpected ways to the same influential white man in Stockholm as they build their lives in the most open society run by the most private people. Told through the perspectives of each of the 3 women, In Every Mirror She's Black is a fast-paced, richly nuanced, yet accessible contemporary novel that touches on important social issues such as racism, classism, fetishization, and tokenism, and what it means to be a Black woman navigating a white-dominated society. Next slide, please. And finally, from international best-selling author Susanna Kearsley comes The Vanished Days, a historical tale of intrigue and revolution in Scotland, and a prequel to her widely popular book, The Winter Sea. This book is told in 2 timelines that interweave the troubled weeks in Edinburgh in 1707 with the tales of a woman who lived through the killing times, a revolution, and Scotland's loss of a colony in the Americas. This is a story of intrigue, adventure, endurance, and of course, romance. Next slide. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys all have a great holiday weekend. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or galley questions, and have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you, Mary. Our next presenter is author Loretta Breuning. Loretta Breuning, PhD, is founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and author of Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin Levels, The Science of Positivity, Stop Negative Thought Patterns by Changing Your Brain Chemistry, and Tame Your Anxiety, Rewiring Your Brain for Happiness. Loretta is Professor Emeritus of Management at California State University, East Bay. The Inner Mammal offers resources that help you rewire your mammalian brain chemistry, including books, videos, podcasts, blogs, and graphics. Loretta's work has been translated into Spanish, Russian, French, Turkish, German. It has appeared in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Psychology Today, Time, Cosmopolitan, Real, Simple, and Fast Company. Loretta's been seen on Fox, Dr. Oz, NBC, and many podcasts. Loretta resides with her husband in Oakland, California, and it is a thrill to have you here, Loretta.
Hi, thanks so much. I tried turning my video on and it won't allow me. Would you mind doing that for me? It said you need to do it. Okay, I will select that here. Good, hi, thanks so much for the introduction. So, status games, why we play and how to stop. Next. Coming soon. Next, please. People care about status because animals care about status. I know this is a very challenging thought, so imagine 20 years ago when I stumbled on this research and how surprised I was and how motivated I was to keep looking for information, because to me it just seemed to explain so much of daily life. And I'm so thrilled that I could finally have a book that tells this whole story. Next, please. We've inherited the limbic brain that motivates this. You've probably heard of the limbic brain, amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus. All these things together are almost exactly the same as the way they are in earlier mammals. And all of my other books explain the limbic brain and its role in our daily lives. But this book only focuses on its role in status seeking. Next, please. Your mammal brain rewards you with a drip of serotonin when you raise your status. Again, I'm sure that this is not what you've heard about life. And again, imagine when I just stumbled on this monkey study, like, whoa, that seems important. And yet it's so consistent with what we know about animals and the brain. Next, please. Serotonin, oh, the top is cut off. I'll put the slideshow on my website, innermammalinstitute.org. Serotonin is not aggression. It's the calm sense that I will get the banana, not aggression. So status seeking is the quest for meeting one's own survival needs from the animal brain's perspective. Next, please. Serotonin is soon metabolized, so you have to keep seeking the one-up position to keep feeling it. Imagine that. That seems to be what people do, is to keep seeking the one-up position. Next, please. The good feeling motivates you to repeat behaviors that raised your status. So in other words, one might call it that treadmill feeling. I haven't done enough. I have to keep doing something. It's like, wow, this is what all mammals feel all the time. And I found that it's somewhat of a relief to know that I'm just creating this. It's not being imposed on me, and everyone is creating it. And I have the power to redirect it by knowing how I'm creating it in my own mind. Next, please. I'm not saying we should think this way, but we do. Next. Natural selection built a brain that makes social comparisons to promote its survival. Now, the book explains this with lots of examples, and they're really fun examples, first about animals and then about history. Next. It rewards you with serotonin when you gain a position of strength. And always, again, looking from the animal perspective, a position of strength is just a moment. It's not a cognitive abstraction. And you could think about that in so many ways, but let's just think about two children. I want the bigger cookie. No, I want the bigger cookie. That's the mammal brain. Next. It alarms you with cortisol when you see a potential threat to your relative position. This is the mind-boggling thing. It's like, if the other child gets the bigger cookie, my brain releases cortisol, which is the predator threat feeling. And this explains why people are so hypersensitive to such small things when in fact our lives are quite safe compared to our ancestors from time immemorial. Next. You don't think this in words because the animal brain cannot process language. This is the mind-boggling thing. And again, explained in all of my books. The mammal brain and the human cortex are not on speaking terms because only the cortex processes language. So your mammal brain cannot tell you in words why it is releasing the serotonin or the cortisol, or in fact that it cares about status. So you could say, I wasn't thinking that, and you're not thinking that in words. Next. These facts were revealed by a century of research on mammalian social behavior, but now they're taboo. Next. It's easy to see the mammalian urge for status in others, especially those you don't like. Next. It's easy to see the one-up impulse throughout history. And again, the book is full of fascinating examples of this. Next. It's hard to see this in yourself, your friends, and cute furry creatures. And that's why we need this book to really understand it. Next. But getting real about these feelings gives you power over them. Next. Neurons connect when serotonin flows, so whatever raised your status in the past wired you to expect good feelings from that. If you explore your mind, you can find so easily those past serotonin moments that are motivating you to seek status in ways that it worked in your past. Next. We all see the world through the lens of our old neural pathways. Next. You can keep going. We all keep striving to stimulate serotonin and avoid cortisol in ways that worked before. Gracefield, yeah, we all create one-down feelings and one-up feelings despite our best intentions. Next. We all keep making social comparisons because it's a core mammalian survival impulse. Next, what's a big-brained mammal to do? And the solution is, it's a whole half of my book. Status Gain shows you healthy ways to give your inner mammal what it needs to feel good. Next, it helps you put yourself up without putting others down. It helps you spark your serotonin without junk status. It helps you manage the cortisol of one down moments. Next, please. Repetition will build new pathways so it feels normal. You will always be a mammal among mammals. Next. You have power over your brain, but not the brains of others. Next. You can wire yourself to enjoy nature's serotonin. You'll be glad you did. Next. And I invite your contact in any way at any time. Thank you. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you so much, Loretta. And now we have Allan J. Lichtman. Allan is a distinguished professor of history at American University and the author of many acclaimed books on US political history, including White Protestant Nation, The Rise of the American Conservative Movement, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, FDR and the Jews, written with Richard Brightman, and The Case for Impeachment. Allan Lichtman is regularly sought out by the media for his authoritative views on voting and elections, important subjects. He lives in Bethesda, Maryland. Welcome, Allan.
Thank you so much. I'm here to talk about democracy. And democracy is a precious thing. But like all precious things, it can be destroyed. In the first golden age of democracy, after World War I, democracies grew from a mere handful to about 24. And then in the early 1940s, it got shattered. There were only about 11 democracies left. Democracies arose again in the late 20th century, but have suffered severe decline in our own time. Freedom House has said democracy has declined or faded away in 25 nations just the last 15 years, including the United States. We were once the world's beacon of democracy. We now rank just 25th. Next. What I have discovered is the 13 cracks, the 13 loopholes in our democracy that makes it vulnerable to destruction. Yes, Donald Trump has crashed through these loopholes more ruthlessly than any other president, but he's not the only one. And the loopholes remain and need to be closed. And that's what this book is all about, saving our democracy. Next. These are the 13 cracks that I discovered: tendency towards autocracy, stonewalling Congress, destroying our sovereignty, building a presidency on lies, corrupting justice, attacking the free press, putting profits above patriotism, undermining the government politically, governing in the dark, militarizing our country, suppressing the vote, obstructing elections, rigging elections. Obviously, I can't talk about all of them, but I'll illustrate it with just a few. Next, please. Richard Nixon startled the nation when 2.5 years after he resigned the presidency, he told interviewer David Frost that when the president does it, it's not illegal. Next. Well, Donald Trump, not after he left the White House, but in the midst of his presidency, raised the bar on Richard Nixon. He said that Article 2 of the Constitution lets me do whatever I want as president. In other words, I can become Vladimir Putin, a guy I admire very much. Next. And that's exactly what he's done, acting both as lawmaker and law enforcement, totally rewriting the law in critical areas of immigration, the environment, and throttling back the campaign to stop climate change. The fix: establish a court of presidential directives that keeps presidents from dragging out litigation for years, but that has a direct jurisdiction over presidential orders. Next. Another area is stonewalling Congress. Donald Trump, even in an impeachment inquiry, when the power of Congress is at its highest, called subpoenas ridiculous and says, we're fighting all congressional subpoenas, no matter how legitimate. Next, the answer, flexing congressional muscle. Use the power of the purse, like Congress has done to stop wars, to stop presidential stonewalling. Even recreate the inherent power of contempt, which has been used before and even enables Congress to jail those who illegally violate their subpoenas. Next, another critical area is lying. Yes, all administrations have lied, but as even former conservative talk show host Charlie Sykes has said, what we see from Donald Trump is different, an attack on credibility itself. After documenting 30,000 false and misleading statements, the fact checkers gave up. It was just too much, 50 or more per day. Democracy can't survive on a foundation of lies. The fix can't stop presidents from lying. You can have a code of conduct. You can enforce perjury. You can have instant fact checks. We have the technology. And most important of all, you can regulate the social media companies that amplify the lies and create these bubbles of communities based upon the lies. Next, we have in our Constitution foreign and domestic emoluments clauses to keep a president from taking things of value from foreign nations or anything but his salary internally. There's no quid pro quo here. These are absolute prohibitions because we shouldn't be guessing where a president's personal interests leave off and the national interests begin. And Trump has trampled all over these clauses by not divesting his far-flung business interests in the US and abroad. Next, the fix, a new conflict of interest act that, among other things, would require disclosure by all presidents and declared candidates of their financial information. Next, the new voter suppression built on the big lie that somehow the 2020 election was taken away from Trump. 360 restrictive voting bills this year, 10 times more than the 35 last year. Iowa, Georgia, Texas have already passed voter suppression laws. The fix, we need a new voting laws. We need a new Voting Rights Act, and we need, believe it or not, we don't have it, a constitutional right to vote. You know, ultimately, the salvation of our democracy depends upon the American people, not upon us academics or the politicians. But you've got to start with knowledge and information. And that's what this book, 13 Cracks, is all about, giving you the basis for becoming, within yourself, part of the salvation of our democracy. It's available in November. You can contact me, the world's easiest email, lichtman@american.edu. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Allan. Thank you, everyone. We're going to do sort of a lightning round of questions for our authors. We'll go in the order in which you all appeared, and I'm just going to ask one question. So let's begin with Dylan and Gastro Obscura. And I guess I was curious in particular about how food shapes communities or cultures or cities. And I wonder, Dylan, if there was one particular example of this that you could tell us about.
Yeah, that's a big topic. It's a huge question. I mean, you know, I think about personally what I grew up eating. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in Minnesota. My family is Scandinavian. And so, you know, we incorporated a lot of foods that, I mean, one irony about this actually is that lutefisk, which is a kind of, you know, slightly horrifying preparation of fish that involves using lye, and then it becomes poisonous and you have to wash the lye out, is actually more popular in the US now as a kind of like memory of Scandinavia than it is in anywhere in Scandinavia. So all of that kind of came over with my family, and I grew up eating that and like lefse, which is kind of like a thin pancake, and also more modern Midwestern cuisines like kind of like Jell-O salads and things like that. And so these things were fully kind of standard growing up. I think when someone sees a kind of Snickers marshmallow salad. Elsewhere, they are surprised by it. I mean, I don't know what to say except that like we all live immersed in the culture of food, and it shapes kind of who we are. It shapes connections to the past, to our families, and the foodways that affect us go across the world. They chart paths, you know, from countries of origin to wherever you are now, and they create a kind of a tactile, experiential, sensory connection to your past and your family. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's like one of the things, there's nothing that can transport you somewhere quicker than like the taste of something. It is the most powerful spark to memory. And so for me, like that is a very powerful part about food and eating. I don't know, it's too big a question to answer in a short way. But.
I apologize. Well, you did a great job. I love it. Plus, you know, you make me think like how what seems regular to some people in another part of the world seems exotic and bizarre. So
truly, and I think investigating, you know, when we talk about wonder at Atlas Obscura, and like we are really talking about a frame for investigating what's both near and far, because, you know, what is surprising is completely relative from the perspective of which you stand. So I think it's more about sort of celebrating all of those foodways and all of the things that make a place or a region or a cultural history special. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dylan.
Of course.
Wanda, so all her little secrets. You know, readers of fiction often conflate the author and her protagonists. You're a corporate lawyer, Elise Littlejohn's a corporate lawyer. I wonder, you're both in Atlanta. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about drawing on your own experiences and imagining a character.
Sure. Well, certainly there are some similarities, not only in our locale and our job duties, but some of the things that Elise Littlejohn experienced inside the corporation in particular are not unfamiliar to me. You know, the kind of toxicity of the workplace, as well as there is a scene that takes place when she and a girlfriend go shopping and they are racially profiled. And those are very familiar to me. However, I wanted the story to take a lot of different twists and turns in order to escalate the tension and the suspense. And it's in those scenes that are, you know, the product of my very vivid imagination. And certainly, you know, I don't go around, you know, in the midst and, you know, embroiled in murder and mayhem, hopefully not. And so again, those came from my imagination. But yeah, some of the scenes that take place, particularly in the present day scenes, yeah, they come from some experience.
Yes, that's both interesting to know and sad to know. I guess a quick follow-up. I'm struck by in novels the balance novelists maintain between pursuing social commentary, as it sounds like you've done and the little I've read, and telling a good story. You know, how do you balance between the two?
I think for me, it really is a matter of making characters that are relatable and that, you know, people kind of come to see, yeah, you know, I've known people like that. I've worked with people like that. And then just placing them in situations that are very realistic. But, you know, of course, in any novel, you know, story is paramount. And so I think once, you know, I develop these characters that I think, you know, people read and they resonate with, then it was kind of, you know, the next easy, you know, step to add in a dash of social commentary, because those things happen to those kinds of real people.
Right. All about story, all about people. Thank you so much, Wanda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, let's talk about people. I love that obituaries set you on your research track. It makes sense. And I was curious about the obvious deep research that unfolded. I mean, you cover a lot of lives in this book. It's phenomenal. I wonder if there was a particular library experience that stood out for you. Or
Well,
any other.
certainly, as I started to write, it was during the beginning period of the pandemic. So there were many places I couldn't go. I couldn't get into the National Archives. I couldn't get responses from the National Holocaust Museum. So to some extent, it was a mixed bag. For smaller museums, I found they would answer me more quickly. And of course, I have a Libby card with the Army War College Library, and so I was able to borrow some books. But I wanted to just show you a little bit more of my research in other ways, because being able to talk to a wonderful group like this, where everyone loves books, as we all do, and it's sad when some have to leave you because you no longer have room for them. And I just wanted to let everyone know that I have adopted some of those who have had to leave. So here is a book on American women in sports for the research I was doing on Alice Marble. And this at one time was property of Seattle Public Schools. Hungry Ghosts, the biography of Mary Taylor Previte, who was raised in a concentration camp in China. This was once part of the DeSoto Public Library in DeSoto, Missouri. So I was able to find this book. So I did a lot of research in looking for original documents and original stories that were helpful to me. The WASP pilots, the Women Air Service pilots. This was part of the Laguna Blanca School Library. So I was able to have it. So if you've had to give up your children here to adoption, rest assured that I'm taking care of as many of them as I can. And if I could add one more thing for you,
Please.
Because this is Memorial Day, Memorial Day is coming up, to ask that everyone take a moment of silence or to remember those who we have lost in the cause of freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So, Loretta, in your fascinating presentation, you mentioned very succinctly history. I wonder if you could explain a little bit about the incredible stories that you included in Status Game.
Sure. Well, I did very brief biographies of individuals whose stories are relevant. Charles Darwin, Jane Austen, Sigmund Freud, Alexander Hamilton, other people you may not know as well. And they're very moving stories because all of their houses are open to the public, and I visited their houses and then I researched their story. And like the status games in Charles Darwin's life, the status games in Sigmund Freud's life, it's mind-blowing. And I find it a real source of relief to say, wow, everybody has the same frustrations. Jane Austen, wow, and their stories are often very sad. And it helps us come to terms with our own ups and downs. And then, of course, I go into prehistory, so Stone Age times and all the way up.
Indeed, you do. A quick follow-up. As many of us have been isolated now for over a year, do you think our status games are going to be even more intense when we rejoin each other?
Well, it will be. I've been struck by how very individual our responses to this situation has been. And my books are all about how our neural pathways build from experience. So happy and unhappy chemicals are like paving on your neural pathways. And when one person has that experience emotionally, and that wires them, and that's their lens, that's how they see the world. So when we get back together, we'll have differences in the way we see the world, just like we always did. And I hope a lot of people have plugged the news into their head, and that becomes like their primary relationship. So those people will have a lot of overlap, but it may not be healthy status. It may be junk status.
Well, I wish us all a lot of luck. Thank you very much, Loretta. Allan, really incredibly important, urgent subject. As you said, democracy's never been under assault the way it is now. Disinformation is a huge part of this. And I wonder if you feel that librarians, library workers, people that treasure books can counter this in any way. Is there any role we can play?
Absolutely. Dictatorships are built more on disinformation than they are on the tips of bayonets or the projectiles of bullets. When the Soviet dictatorship arose, they made everyone register typewriters, so no one could type anything subversive. You couldn't do bourgeois science or history or sociology. We all know Hitler's stormtroopers seized the books and burned them. I think librarians need to be front and center here as the guardians of truth and as the guardians of information. Librarians need to speak out about how democracy is founded on truth, and librarians need to do everything in their power to tell us how we can transcend all the disinformation that buzzes around us in the media and return to traditional ways of evidence, analysis, and truth. You know, as George Orwell reminds us in his Prescient 1984, the dictatorship he talks about was not just built on boot in the face, it was built on doublethink on lies.
Oh, thank you. Perfectly said. I really appreciate that. I wish we could talk more. What an amazing array of subjects to consider. I hope everyone out there will pursue these books and learn more about our wonderful presenters today. Thank you all so much. Thank you for these enlightening presentations and discussion, and one more, a big thank you to all our presenters. On Tuesday, thank you so much. On Tuesday, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklestonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like these, which all look so appealing. Did you know that registration for ALA's virtual annual conference and exhibition is now open? Taking place between June 23rd and 29th, this year's conference will feature truly amazing speakers, educational programming, and an opportunity to connect with colleagues and librarians everywhere. Please visit 2021.alaannual.org for more details. I hope we'll see you there. For even more library love, including tips on readers advisory and collection development, the scoop on new and forthcoming books, such as those you heard about today, and interviews with authors and librarians everywhere, please tune into our Shelf Care podcast at soundcloud.com/shelfcare. Not yet a subscriber, please become one. Pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com. You will lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of the special webinar offer to get all those forms of Booklist for only $75. I hope you can join us. Thank you for being here today for this amazing extravaganza. One more big thank you to our sponsors, Workman Publishing, HarperCollins Publishers, Bloomsbury, Sourcebooks, and Rowman and Littlefield. Stay well, everyone. Celebrate Memorial Day with care, as Mary Eater said, and this concludes today's webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.